The canyon cliffs loomed over the desert like immense sun-scorched walls. There, among the rocks, a squad of rangers rode. Young Elijah Green sat firmly in his saddle, holding the reins with confidence, though his eyes betrayed the weariness of a long journey. This was another mission, to find the band of smugglers hiding in these lands. He trusted his men. They laughed, exchanged words, and guided their horses confidently along the narrow trail. None of them knew that in just a few minutes everything would change. Suddenly, a whistle rang out, a signal. Shots erupted from both sides of the canyon. An ambush. Bullets whizzed past. Horses reared. Elijah drew his revolver and returned fire, but he realized too late the enemy had known their route in advance. He glanced back at his comrades, and his heart turned cold. They weren't resisting. They weren't screaming in terror. There was no surprise on their faces. Instead, they looked at Elijah with cold determination. "Fool," one of them sneered, "did you think we were brothers?" The butt of a rifle struck him off his horse. The canyon floor met Elijah harshly, dust filling his lungs. He heard laughter above him as the traders rode away, leaving him under the sun without water or hope of survival. Blood dripped onto the stones, his body burned with pain, but his heart boiled with rage. He stared into the cloudless sky and whispered through parched lips, "I will return, I will survive, and every one of you will pay." The wind howled between the cliffs as if the canyon itself was memorizing those words. Elijah Green was buried here as a ranger, but it was here that another man was born, one who would one day become a legend. Years had passed. The canyon had long been overgrown with silence, and only rare travelers remembered that story of the ranger's betrayal. But Elijah Green had not died there. He had clawed his way out, wounded, parched with thirst, and from that day on he became a man without a home. He no longer wore the uniform. A worn traveler's cloak now hung from his shoulders, weathered by the roads, and his hat hid his eyes. There was something in Elijah's gaze that made people look away, the weight of all he had endured, the shadow of an old oath. Years of wandering had turned him into a ghost of the prairies. By day he walked the dusty roads and endless plains. By night he lit a fire at the foot of some cliff and stared into the flames as if he could see the faces of those who had left him to die. Sometimes he took on work, escorting caravans, tracking fugitives, or helping farmers ward off jackals or coyotes, but he never stayed anywhere long. People in saloons whispered about him. "He's a wanderer with no name," some said. "He's a bounty hunter," others added. The oldest ones just nodded toward the road and whispered, "Be careful, son. They say he was a ranger, and something inside him burned to ash." Every evening Elijah sat by the fire, pulled out an old flask, and gazed into the stars. He didn't know where his path led, but he knew one thing for certain. One day he would meet those who had left him in the canyon, and then the long road would come to an end. And as he wandered, the legend of the ghost of the canyon grew. To some he was a savior, to others a grim avenger, but for Elijah himself it all meant one thing: the road wasn't over yet. The road led Elijah to a god-forsaken town. An old sign hung over the entrance, "Dead Hill." The name suited it. The streets were empty, the houses half-rotten, the windows boarded up. It seemed the town was living its last days. Only one street remained lively, the main one. There, near the saloon, armed men crowded. They were the Black Jackals, a gang that held the entire district in fear. They laughed loudly, grabbed women by the hair as they fetched water, kicked passers-by, and nearby, as if nothing were happening, stood the sheriff. His badge gleamed dully on his chest, but his eyes said it all. He had sold out long ago. Elijah rode down the street slowly. His horse stepped carefully through the dusty earth, and people watched from behind curtains. No one came out to greet him. No one said hello. Adults hurried to pull their children off the road. Rumors of the ghost of the canyon had arrived before him. Someone in the saloon whispered, "That's him, the one who appears where death smells." But Elijah was not seeking fame. He was seeking the truth. And when his gaze met the eyes of the gang leader, a sharp pain of memory pierced his heart. That laughing voice, the same one that echoed in the canyon back then. Elijah understood. The road had led him exactly where he needed to be. He dismounted near the saloon, took off his hat without haste, shook the dust from his cloak, and stepped inside. Behind him the town froze, as if it knew the night in Dead Hill would be unlike any other. The saloon greeted Elijah with the smell of cheap whiskey, tobacco smoke, and the rumble of coarse laughter. The tables were occupied by the black jackals. They were making noise, playing cards, knocking over bottles. The piano music abruptly stopped when the doors swung open, and he appeared in the doorway, tall in a dusty cloak, with a cold gaze. He walked calmly, but each of his steps echoed louder than the stomping of dozens of boots. He stopped at the counter and placed a few coins on it. "Whiskey," he said curtly to the bartender. The gang leader noticed him immediately. A broad-shouldered man with a crooked smile, a scar across his cheek, and the arrogant confidence that the whole town belonged to him. He stood up and took a few steps forward. "Well, well, look, a stranger decided to drink with us," he drawled, squinting. "Who are you to walk in like you own the place?" Elijah turned his head slowly. His gaze was calm, but deep in his eyes burned the fire of long-held pain. "I am the one who came for you." Silence fell over the hall. Even those who had been laughing a second earlier froze. The leader smirked, trying to diffuse the tension. "Hear that, boys? This ragged stranger claims he came for me." Elijah took a sip of whiskey and set the glass back down without flinching. "Your road ends today." The words hung in the air, heavy as a hammer blow. The bandits' hands moved toward their holsters. The saloon grew so quiet that the creaking of the old ceiling could be heard. Everything was building toward the next second, deciding who would walk out alive. The moment stretched into an eternity. Everyone knew thunder was about to strike. The leader was still smirking, but his fingers were already hovering near his holster. Elijah didn't move, like a statue, only his eyes coldly tracking everyone in the room. One of the bandits snapped first. He drew his revolver and shouted, "Die, you stranger!" A shot rang out, but Elijah was faster than anyone. His hand darted toward his holster with honed precision, steel glimmering in the dim lamplight. The bandit's bullet went into the ceiling, and he himself was thrown onto a table, shattering bottles and scattering cards. The saloon erupted into chaos. People screamed. Some rushed for the exit. The pianist collapsed under his instrument. The jackals opened fire from all directions. Bullets whistled. Chairs splintered into pieces. Mirrors behind the bar cracked. Elijah moved calmly, as if every second was known to him in advance. His steps were precise, his hands swift. One by one the bandits fell, some with revolvers in hand, others without even managing to fire. The leader retreated toward the back door, ordering his men to cover him, but the jackals already understood this man didn't miss. The few remaining ones fled the saloon, saving their own lives. Soon the floor was littered with bodies. Gunsmoke hung like fog, smelling of gunpowder and blood. Only two remained in the hall, Elijah and the leader. The latter pressed against the wall, wiped blood from his lip, and looked at him without trace of laughter. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Who in the hell are you?" he rasped. Elijah slowly reloaded his revolver, and the sound of clicking cartridges echoed through the empty saloon. "I am your reckoning." They stepped outside. The night in Dead Hill was quiet. Only the wind swept scraps of paper and dry grass along the dusty road. The moon hung high, casting a pale light on two silhouettes frozen opposite each other. The leader of the Black Jackal stood confidently, but there was no laughter in his eyes. He recognized this man, recognized him in the cold gaze, in the shadow falling across his face. "It can't be! You were supposed to die in that canyon!" Elijah took a step forward, his cloak swaying in the wind. Elijah took a step forward, his cloak swaying in the wind. "You laughed back then," he said quietly, but every word cut through the air. "I heard your voice as the ground gave way beneath me, and I swore that one day that laughter would fall silent." The leader drew his revolver and smirked, now nervously with desperation. "You think you can take me? I was shooting faster than anyone before you even learned to hold a gun." Elijah stood motionless. Only his fingers lightly touched the grip of his revolver. "Today won't be decided by speed. Today will be decided by the truth." Silence hung over the street. From the windows of the houses behind them, the residents watched, holding their breath. Two shadows facing each other, with 10 meters of dusty road between them. Everything came down to this moment. The leader drew his revolver and smirked, now nervously with desperation. "You think you can take me? I was shooting faster than anyone before you even learned to hold a gun." Elijah stood motionless. Only his fingers lightly touched the grip of his revolver. "Today won't be decided by speed. Today will be decided by the truth." The leader moved first. His hand jerked downward, but he was too late. Elijah's shot shattered the silence, and the next instant the bandit's body collapsed into the dust. The revolver fell from his hand, and his eyes remained wide open, as if he still couldn't believe what had happened. Elijah stepped closer and leaned over him. "I kept my oath," he said. The wind carried his final words through the night town. The duel was over. When the last shot faded, the town fell into silence. The wind swept dust from the street as people slowly emerged from their homes. Women held their children's hands, elders leaned on walking sticks, and men watched warily. They had seen it all, the fall of the tyranny that had held them in fear for years. Elijah stood in the middle of the street, his silhouette stark against the moonlight, his hand still holding the revolver, slowly lowered. He said nothing, accepted no congratulations. In the eyes of the townsfolk, he was a hero, but all he felt was the weight of what he had done. The sheriff, who had once hidden behind the bandits, rushed to the doorway, but no one paid him any attention. They already knew the power he had clung to had died with the black jackals. Someone approached Elijah timidly and asked, "Will you stay? We need someone like you." Elijah lifted his gaze and shook his head almost imperceptibly. He adjusted his hat, turned, and stepped into the darkness. His footsteps echoed hollowly on the deserted street until they dissolved into the night. The townspeople stood in silence for a long time, watching him go. They knew he would not return. He did not belong to this world. His road stretched onward into the dusty lands where other shadows of the past still waited. And so the ghost of the canyon vanished once more, leaving only a legend behind. Somewhere out there on the endless expanse of the Wild West, he kept walking, lonely as the wind, yet carrying justice to places where it was needed most.